When it comes to financial reforms in the United States specifically, what are the most necessary ones? What are the most necessary measures?
Well, you do need to regulate the banking system. Basically, you've given now an implicit guarantee to the banks that are too big to fail. And you have to then regulate them in order to ensure that the guarantee is not invoked. That's the job of the regulators. They fell down on it. They let the banks regulate themselves, and the banks ran away with that opportunity and got into trouble. So you can't let them get away with it, run away with it. You have to reduce the amount of leverage that they are allowed to use. You have to recognize that there are systemic risks that the individual participants don't necessarily have to take into account, because as individual participants, they can expect to sell the securities to someone else. But if everybody is on the same side, then that you can't. You create a crash when the individuals try to do it. That's what happened. So you have a systemic risks which are not identical to the risk of the individual participants, and that is the job of the regulators to guard against. So you have to recognize that the whole concept of how financial markets operate was false. Namely, the idea that they tend towards equilibrium. They don't. They actually are prone to generate asset bubbles. And so the regulators have to accept responsibility about not letting those bubbles become self-reinforcing and create a crash. That responsibility they expressly refused. They said we can control the money supply, but not asset bubbles. And they have to accept responsibility for it, knowing that they will always make mistakes. However, when they control credit, they take a step and then they get a feedback from the market. And so the feedback will tell them whether they've done enough or whether they have to do more. So this feedback helps to correct and get close to maintaining balance. This is a responsibility that they have shirked, and they now have to accept. And for that purpose, they have to use instruments which have fallen into disuse. This is the margin requirements and minimum capital requirements. Now, those requirements have to be varied from time to time to counterbalance the prevailing mood of the market. So if markets are euphoric, you have to tighten the margin requirements. If they are, as they are now, despondent, then you can let it loose. And because of that, this is not actually the time that you want to impose those requirements, but you have to prepare for doing it. And at the time when the economy restarts, lending restarts, that will be the time to impose tighter capital requirements on banks.
Are you confident that when things get better, when the economy, when the financial sector are more robust, there will be sufficient political will to impose the sorts of restrictions you're discussing?
No, because actually banks are very influential politically, and now you have actually the remaining banks, you've got 3 or 4 banks that dominate the banking scene in the United States. They have a quasi-oligopolistic position, and they want to use their clout to protect that position.